I'm not coming back. I've met someone better. Your things are in storage." The text hit my phone at 12:17 IEME, slicing through the quiet of my Boise kitchen like a scalpel. I was seated in my usual spot by the window, half-finished mug of cold coffee in one hand, the other idly scrolling news on my tablet. Just another late night? Until it wasn't. Attached to the message was a screenshot. $112,460. 34 cents gone, siphoned clean from our joint account into one with her name on it. No goodbye, no tears, just a financial assassination and a couple of sentences to mark the end of 14 years of marriage. I didn't flinch. I didn't curse. I'm Eric Delaney, 53 years old, a forensic data analyst trained to find hidden patterns, expose financial deceit, and dismantle corporate fraud. But I had failed to detect the slow decay in my own home. The missed birthdays, the growing distance, the subtle shift from we to me in every conversation. She'd planned this down to the minute, maybe thinking she was 5 steps ahead. She had no idea the game she just triggered. I closed the browser, launched a secondary laptop I kept for emergencies, and logged into an encrypted email Rachel didn't know existed. 3 alerts from my internal monitoring system blinked at me. Failed login attempts, password resets, activity on accounts I'd buried deeper than any average eye could trace. She was trying, she was meticulous, but I was already gone before she hit send. With a quiet breath, I typed 2 words to my brother, a cybersecurity expert in Denver. It's time. He didn't ask questions. We'd prepared for this day years ago, knowing her ambition ran just as deep as her charm. And as I sat back, watching her digital footprint scramble for control, one truth settled in like a storm on the horizon. The moment she hit transfer, she didn't just take my money. She triggered my war plan. It didn't start like this, of course. When I first met Rachel, she was radiant, 32, running a small yoga studio out of a rented space behind a bookstore in Flagstaff. I was recently divorced, back then still carrying the bruises of a first marriage that fell apart under the weight of career ambition and mismatched values. Rachel was different, or at least I thought so. She laughed easily, spoke about mindfulness and purpose like they were tangible things you could build a life on. She didn't care what I did for a living. Her words, not mine. "You do something with data and crime, right?" she'd say, waving it off with a smile. "As long as you're happy and we're stable, that's all that matters." I found her carefree attitude refreshing, almost rebellious in a world obsessed with titles and LinkedIn profiles. Within a year we were married. I moved her to Boise, into a condo I'd paid off years earlier, and she brought her yoga dreams with her. I helped her expand the studio, new equipment, polished branding, a downtown lease she never could have afforded on her own. She promised she'd pay me back in gratitude and homemade chai. I laughed then. Looking back now, I realize how easy I was to impress, how much I wanted to believe in the version of us we kept showing the world. The cracks didn't show up all at once. They crept in like coal through a window you forget to seal. It was little things, always. A weekend retreat that turned into 5 days. Her phone flip screen down every time I walked into the room. Clothes that were too glamorous for a yoga teacher, shoes that had never once touched a studio floor. At first I told myself she was just growing. Women evolve, right? She had a business now, thousands of followers on Instagram, partnerships with health brands I'd never heard of. She spoke in hashtags, and hashtags got her free trips to Sedona and Malibu. "You wouldn't enjoy it," she said once, brushing me off. "It's all green juice and postures, not really your scene." I let it go. I was buried in work anyway, consulting for 2 forensic firms and helping the state track down embezzlement cases. I was good at catching lies. I just didn't want to believe the one forming right in front of me. The night she forgot my birthday should have been a turning point. I came home from a deposition in Portland to an empty apartment. No card, no dinner, not even a message. When I brought it up the next day, she acted shocked, horrified, and then did what she always did. Overcompensated. A Rolex showed up in a velvet box that evening, with a note that said, "To my rock." I accepted it, but something in me shifted. I didn't show it, but I stayed up until 3 that night, not admiring the watch, but finalizing the paperwork for the LLPs and trusts I'd started structuring years earlier. That was when I knew, deep down, that this story had an ending. I just didn't know when it would arrive. It was the kind of love that made you feel seen in the beginning and invisible by the end. the kind that cloaked itself in smiles and routine, but hollowed you out like termites in the walls of a house that looks fine until it collapses. And now, with one message, she'd finally given it the last push. By the time the sun came up that morning, I wasn't mourning, I was mobilizing. There's something surreal about watching your life fall apart while eating toast at the same table you once carved pumpkins with your wife. But grief wasn't invited to breakfast, strategy was. I logged into my primary financial dashboard, a system I'd custom built over a decade ago for my own personal use. Code-laced, double-authenticated, invisible to anyone without the key. It had originally been a side project, a kind of forensic sandbox where I tested software that mimicked laundering patterns for law enforcement clients. But over the years, I'd adapted it, hardened it. It became my personal fortress, where I monitored every dollar I didn't want Rachel or anyone else knowing about. The first move was immediate. I froze every shared account and credit line. I wasn't just worried about what she had taken, I was worried about what she might still try to access. I'd seen it before. People don't stop after the first hit. They come back for whatever's left. Within 20 minutes, I'd submitted a fraud alert to our bank's internal investigations team, flagged the $112,000 0-cent transfer, and attached copies of our marriage license, my power of attorney, and a declaration stating the funds had been moved under false pretense while I was unaware. Legal gray area? Maybe. But I knew how these processes worked. Banks don't like exposure. They'd freeze first and ask questions later. That bought me time, exactly what I needed. Next, I sent everything to my attorney, Cynthia Ortiz, a bulldog of a woman based in Twin Falls who once got a hedge fund manager indicted for hiding assets in Costa Rica. She was aggressive, relentless, and most importantly, loyal. I'd put her on retainer 3 years ago, not because I anticipated a divorce, but because I knew that love alone wasn't enough to keep me safe. Along with the documentation, I included an instruction I never thought I'd have to activate. Initiate dissolution proceedings under financial misconduct grounds. Move quickly, assume zero cooperation. Within the hour, her reply came through. Understood, your timing was excellent. Most people don't act until they've already lost everything. I wasn't done. I called my mother next. She'd always liked Rachel, or at least she'd pretended to. She left me, I said simply. She took the money and moved out while she was supposed to be on a retreat. There was a pause on the line long enough for a continent to cross. Then, finally, I'm sorry, honey, but I'm not surprised. The confirmation I didn't ask for, but apparently needed. What are you going to do? She asked softly. I've been preparing to do for years, I said. Protect what's mine. Rachel started calling me around 9:00 AE. I watched her name flash across my screen again and again. Decline, decline, decline. Then the text messages began. First confusion, then panic, then threats disguised as pleas. What the hell did you do? The money's gone and my cards don't work. Eric, call me. This is serious, I didn't answer. I wasn't angry, I was focused, calm like a surgeon before the first incision. Around noon, I drove to the storage facility she mentioned in her original message. I typed in the code she'd so helpfully included and opened the unit. Inside were 2 boxes, one with my clothes and another with my laptop. The rest was gone. No photos, no books, no keepsakes, no trace of the life we'd built. She didn't just want to leave, she wanted to erase me. And that's when the last piece of me that cared finally shut off. She thought she'd ended something, but she'd only flipped a switch on what I'd built to begin, because some men leave quietly, and others just go underground to reload. Rachel always underestimated silence. She mistook my calm for compliance, my quiet for weakness. But silence is a weapon if you know how to wield it. By the time she showed up at my office the following Monday, her world was already cracking beneath her feet. The receptionist buzzed my line. There's a woman here, says she's your wife. Says, pretty agitated. I could hear the edge in her voice, the kind people reserve for situations that no wisping of word of any kind. Tell her I'm unavailable. If she needs to speak with me, she can contact my attorney. I hung up before she could respond. I watched the security footage later that evening, Rachel in her workout leggings and oversized sunglasses, pacing the lobby like a frustrated celebrity being denied a table. Her expression flipped between charm and fury, hoping someone would cave. No one did. When the message was finally delivered, her lips tightened and she walked out fast, the kind of fast that says, "I'm not done." She wasn't wrong, but neither was I. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that I'd already launched the second wave of my plan. Cynthia had filed for divorce under Idaho's Title 32, Section 603, Extreme Financial Misconduct and Concealment of Marital Assets. Harsh, maybe. But so is draining a shared account and announcing your exit via text. The motion came as a petition for emergency asset protection, which the judge approved by noon on Tuesday. Every remaining asset, vehicles, real estate, the yoga studio, her influencer accounts that were now legally tied to LLCs I had once helped her set up, was frozen. She couldn't sell, she couldn't shift, she couldn't even lease. By Wednesday, the text changed tone again. Gone were the threats. Now came the apologies. "Can we talk? I'm sorry. This got out of hand. I didn't mean to hurt you." I read every word like a detective scans a confession, looking for real remorse and finding none. Just fear, desperation. A woman who'd bet the house and suddenly realized the table wasn't rigged in her favor anymore. But it wasn't until Thursday that I knew I had her full attention. The studio's bank called to report an overdraft attempt. Her corporate card had been declined at a wellness expo in San Diego. She'd tried to charge $1,800, 0 cents in protein shakes and branded yoga mats. Denied. Then her personal Amex flagged suspicious activity, a failed attempt to open a new line of credit, using our old address and my social security number as secondary guarantor. Sloppy. Illegal, pathetic, and poetic. By Friday, mutual friends started reaching out. "Hey man, I don't want to take sides, but Rachel says you're being cold, that you froze her accounts out of spite." I didn't respond. People love to defend chaos when it wears a pretty face. No one asked where she was last week. No one asked what she took. No one cared how I found out. I poured myself a drink that night, something aged and sharp, and stepped out onto the patio. Boise was quiet, the sky above me open and still. I thought about the photos she took from the storage unit, the heirlooms she didn't think were worth keeping. She hadn't just left me, she'd tried to erase me. And that was a different kind of crime, not punishable by law, but by something older, more primal. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about reclaiming what was mine. Not just the money, not just the name, but my narrative. She could rewrite the past in Instagram captions and curated wellness quotes. But the truth was already out of her control. She wanted a clean break. What she got was a clean war. The moment I realized this wasn't just betrayal, but premeditation, was the moment I stopped playing defense. She hadn't just taken the money and run. She'd planned this for months, maybe longer. I could see it now, mapped out in every wire transfer, every selectively edited story she'd told our friends, every investment she'd made in her new life long before the old one was officially over. I went back to my hotel that Friday night and opened my laptop like a surgeon rolling up his sleeves. The tools were familiar, precise. Databases, credit trackers, corporate registries, subpoena-free background checks. I didn't need access to her accounts. I just needed to follow the scent of money. And hers stank of amateur ambition. His name kept popping up, Derek Clay, the someone better she'd referenced in her midnight message. I'd seen his face on her Instagram before, shirtless yoga poses on a cliffside in Sedona, protein shake sponsorships, phrases like alpha energy and holistic dominance typed without irony. A man whose personal brand was louder than his income stream. I started digging. The gym he owned in Bend, Oregon was sleek on the surface. Social media was all filtered perfection. High-gloss equipment, testimonials, smoothie bars, soft lighting. But the numbers told a different story. His business had taken out 3 loans in the past 18 months, 2 of them barely being serviced. The gym was leveraged beyond reason, operating on fumes. And Rachel, as it turned out, wasn't just... I traced the signature on a $185,000, 0 cents equipment loan filed under Clay's LLC. Her name, right there in bold. But what made me sit up wasn't her name, it was mine. Hidden deep in the fine print was a clause indicating spousal joint guarantee. She'd used our marital status, my credit rating, and the stable income she always belittled to secure better terms on his dream. She hadn't just invested in a new life, she'd mortgaged mine to pay for it. I stared at the document, the cursor blinking on my screen like a pulse, steady. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was motivated. The next morning, I drove 3 hours to Denver to meet my brother Jason in person. A digital forensics analyst by trade, Jason had helped me construct the digital labyrinth Rachel had just stumbled into. He'd seen hundreds of corporate takedowns, but nothing this personal. "Ready to go nuclear?" he asked. I shook my head. "I don't need to destroy them. I just need to remove every false foundation they've built." Together, we spent 6 hours combing through every asset linked to Derek Clay Fitness LLC. Vendor contracts, lease agreements, equipment warranties. What we found was a house of cards, glued together by influencer dreams and financial malpractice. Derek had used Rachel's assets as leverage not just once, but repeatedly. The new studio lease in downtown Bend, secured using joint marital equity. The company SUV co-signed under Rachel's name, but with me listed as a secondary insured party for rate discounts. They'd taken pieces of my life, repackaged them, and stamped a new label on the outside. By sunset, I had enough to move forward. I met Cynthia at her office that evening, handed her the folder of documents. "I want to file for emergency injunctions on all relevant financial instruments, loans, leases, co-signed assets, everything," I said. "We'll bring it to the court Monday morning. They won't know what hit them." She nodded, flipping through the paperwork. "This isn't just a divorce," she said, smiling tightly. "It's asset reclamation." Driving back to the hotel that night, the air felt colder, cleaner. I rolled the windows down and let the wind hit my face as I crossed the river, Boise glowing behind me like a memory I was ready to forget. Rachel thought she'd written the ending, but she'd only written the setup. I was about to take control of the final act. I didn't storm into Derek's gym the next morning. I scheduled a drop-in class under a fake name and showed up dressed like any other aging guy chasing flexibility. The front desk attendant handed me a waiver. "First time?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. The facility was everything I expected. Clean, curity, Instagram ready, every detail choreographed to project calm, confidence, and success. But I wasn't there for downward dog or smoothie samples. I was there to introduce reality into the echo chamber of fantasy. Derek spotted me halfway through the lobby. He was taller than he looked online, more polished in person. Tan, capped teeth, designer joggers. He looked like he'd just walked off a TED Talk stage. "Hey man, I'm Derek. Can I help you?" The tone was practiced, the handshake firm. "We need to talk," I said, not loud but direct. His smile faltered just for a second before he gestured toward a glass-walled office near the back. "Sure, let's chat." Inside, he closed the door and leaned against the desk, arms crossed, still trying to control the narrative. "So, what's this about?" I didn't sit. I just pulled a folder from my jacket and placed it on the desk. "These are the financial documents connecting you to Rachel. Loans, leases, lines of credit. Every one of them backed in part by marital assets you had no legal access to." He didn't reach for the folder right away. "Look," he said slowly. "Rachel told me you two were separated, that she was free to—" "Don't lie," I cut in. "This isn't a moral discussion. I'm not here because you slept with my wife. I'm here because you used my name, my credit, my insurance, my stability to fund your operation." He opened the folder, scanned a few pages. The blood drained from his face like someone had opened a valve in his neck. "These are legit?" he asked, "since our assets are now frozen pending divorce. The banks are likely to call those loans in fast. They'll come for collateral first. That shiny new equipment, the SUV, maybe even this lease." I let that sink in. He looked up, jaw tight. "What do you want?" I smiled, just slightly. "Nothing from you. I just thought you should know what's coming." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing," I said, not turning around. "When Rachel moved out, she took some items of mine, personal things, family things. If you come across a box with old photos, a pocket watch, a wooden box with a small compass in it, return them." He didn't answer. He just stood there, still holding the folder like it might catch fire. By the time I got back to the hotel that evening, a courier had dropped off a package at the front desk. Inside were the missing items, my father's watch, the photos from our first anniversary in Florence, my mother's old cookbook with the handwritten notes in the margins. No note was included. None was needed. The message was clear. Derek understood exactly what he'd stepped into, and that the war was no longer his to fight. She dragged him into the deep end without realizing I'd already drained the pool. Monday morning came like the final chapter of a book Rachel never bothered to read. Cynthia and I arrived at the courthouse with a stack of evidence, a timeline built with the precision of a federal case, and a motion for emergency asset protection so tight a crowbar couldn't pry it loose. The hearing was short. The judge, a man named Halderman, reviewed the signatures, the co-signed loans, the represented marital status, and nodded slowly as he read. "Loan fraud," he said aloud. "Interesting that it intersects with a dissolution case." Cynthia didn't flinch. "We're not asking the court to criminally pursue her," she said coolly. "But we do believe financial protection is warranted. The banks may see it differently." The motion was approved in less than 10 minutes. That afternoon, Rachel's attorney, some fresh-faced, overly confident transplant from Portland named Chad Renner, sent a notice demanding immediate access to all withheld financial records. He accused me of intentional opacity and threatened to report me to the Idaho State Board for professional misconduct if I didn't comply. I forwarded the email to Cynthia with a one-line message: "Proceed as planned." She replied 5 minutes later with a PDF of our formal response. A motion to compel Rachel's full financial disclosures, including undeclared assets, partnership income, and any use of marital credit structures to benefit third-party individuals. The following day, she showed up at my office again. I didn't see her, I was in a meeting, but security caught her standing in the lobby for 15 minutes, arguing with the front desk staff and pacing like a woman whose world was shrinking by the hour. She never called me, didn't text. That I knew what was coming. Thursday morning, we met for court-ordered mediation. She walked in with the same curated confidence she always wore: clean hair, designer blouse, calm smile. But her eyes betrayed her. The edges were red, makeup heavier than usual, as if she were painting over cracks no filter could hide. She didn't look at me. She just sat down across the table and folded her hands. Chad spoke first. "My client is prepared to be reasonable, despite the aggressive tone these proceedings have taken." Cynthia nodded politely. "Then, let's proceed." She opened a folder and slid a single-page document across the table. Bank completed its preliminary investigation. The equipment loan, the SUV, the commercial lease, they've determined Rachel forged Eric's signature on all co-applications. As of this morning, the matter has been referred to the Ada County District Attorney's Office. Rachel's face paled like the life had been siphoned out of her through her pores. Her lips parted slightly, as if her body were struggling to find oxygen. Chad, to his credit, read the document and kept his tone even. "We'll need time to review." Cynthia nodded again. "Of course. But you should be aware, this meeting is a courtesy. If your client signs the proposed settlement today, Eric is prepared to file a statement with the DA, indicating the signatures may have been done with implied consent. If she refuses, well, then we trust the legal system to proceed accordingly." There it was. Not revenge, not cruelty, just consequences. Rachel looked at me for the first time since this all began. "Criminal charges, Eric?" she said, voice trembling. "You can't be serious." I held her gaze without blinking. "I didn't press charges. The bank did. That's what happens when you forge signatures and use someone else's financial identity to fund your boyfriend's failing business." Chad leaned toward her, whispering furiously. But Rachel wasn't listening. She was staring at the paper in front of her like it had written itself in blood. Cynthia pulled out a second document. "Here's the agreement. Rachel keeps the yoga studio and her personal vehicle. She assumes all debts incurred post-separation. No alimony. Eric retains the condo, the retirement portfolio, and all secured investments. Mutual assets remain frozen until the final division, pending discovery review." Chad opened his mouth, but Rachel raised a hand. "I'll sign it." The pen shook in her hand. She didn't ask for modifications. She didn't argue. She just signed. As we walked out of the building, she caught up with me in the hallway, grabbing my arm. "I never thought you'd fight back like this," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I turned to her slowly. "That was your mistake. You thought I was the man you remembered." I gently pulled my arm away. "That man died when you sent that text." And with that, I walked out, not just of the building, but of her story entirely. The papers were signed, the DA paused their pursuit, and for the first time in weeks, the buzzing in my chest stilled. It wasn't euphoria, it wasn't even satisfaction. It was something colder: peace. A peace earned not through mercy, but through endurance. Rachel moved out of state within days of the mediation. Colorado, from what I gathered. Boulder, probably. Her Instagram reactivated quietly. No apologies, no explanations, just mountains and matcha and vague quotes about healing and fresh starts. Her followers had no idea the fire that burned beneath those filtered skylines. Derek? He didn't last. The gym lease was terminated within a month. The bank seized the equipment, the truck, even the vending machine. Last I heard, he'd resurfaced in Miami, trying to launch a podcast on entrepreneurial masculinity. The kind of man who always rebuilds castles in the sand, then acts surprised when the tide comes in. I didn't speak to either of them again. I moved out of the hotel 2 weeks later and into a modest craftsman-style house just off the edge of downtown Boise. 3 bedrooms, a creaky porch swing, wood floors that still groaned with age when you walked barefoot. Nothing impressive, but it had bones, good ones, the kind that hold weight without complaint. The furniture came slowly. I picked pieces that made sense, not for entertaining, not for display, but for me. A reading chair near the window where the morning light hit just right. A solid oak desk for quiet thinking. A hand-built bench in the backyard where I could sit and listen to nothing. It took time to undo the noise she left behind, the echo of someone who always needed to be seen. I wasn't invisible anymore. I just didn't need a witness. Jason came by on weekends to help me rebuild the kitchen. We replaced every cabinet, ripped out the tile, refinished the sink. It was slow work, intentional. "You know," he said one Saturday as we measured out new shelving, "you could have taken her for everything. The fraud alone would have ensured that." I shrugged, checking the level. "What's the point? She's not my problem anymore." And I meant it. I was no longer angry, no longer sad. I was just done. I took 2 weeks off work. No emails, no audits, no depositions. I packed a small bag, locked up the house, and drove north toward Sandpoint, toward the cabin my dad and I used to fish from before life got complicated. The road was empty, and for the first time in years, so was my head. Somewhere around Coeur d'Alene, I pulled over and stood by the water. Just stood, watching the ripples move without urgency. The sky stretch above me like it owed me nothing, and gave everything. She had tried to leave me with nothing. But what she didn't understand, what people like her never understand, is that the most dangerous man isn't the one who fights back in rage. It's the one who prepares, who endures, who lets you think you've won until the silence hits. Because the silence, that's where the reckoning lives. The morning I returned from the cabin, I didn't unlock the house right away. I stood in the driveway, keys in hand, watching the sun crawl across the shingles like it was giving me permission to begin again. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. Inside, the light hit the living room just right. Dust floated lazily through the air. For once, I didn't feel like I had to chase anything down. No threats, no questions, no lies humming beneath the surface. Just space. I brewed a cup of coffee and sat at the oak desk, flipping open a leather notebook I hadn't touched since law school. I didn't write anything dramatic, just a single line. "You survived without becoming hard. That's enough." I didn't feel victorious. That's the part no one tells you. Real revenge doesn't taste sweet. It tastes like quiet, like freedom wrapped in the absence of chaos. Rachel was gone, but more importantly, the version of myself that tolerated her kind of erosion was gone too. She didn't just leave me, she exposed me to myself. I spent years believing I could buy peace, compromise my instincts, and call it love. But real peace doesn't require sacrifice. It requires boundaries. It requires the strength to walk away before you're pushed. I didn't need her back. I didn't need her sorry. What I needed, what I built, was a life no one could steal again. Not because it was hidden, but because it was honest. I went back to work the next Monday with the clarity of someone who'd been to war and came home with both hands clean. My clients didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. You can tell when someone's been through something by how they hold silence. A few friends checked in. I told them I was good, and for once, I meant it. Weeks passed, then months. I planted rosemary in the backyard, fixed a squeaky fence, started sleeping through the night. The past didn't vanish, it just stopped chasing me. One afternoon, I found Rachel's old watch tucked in a box she'd missed. I stared at it for a while, then set it aside for donation. Some things don't need to be destroyed, they just need to not belong to you anymore. And me, I wasn't looking for revenge. I was just looking for the exit, and when I finally found it, it was quieter than I expected.